Bitcoin is not what most people think. Most people think Bitcoin is a trade, a bubble, a casino with better branding, something people chase when they want to get rich fast and abandon when fear gets expensive. That is the surface story, the safe story, the story people repeat when they want to sound cautious without really understanding what they are looking at. But the deeper truth is far more uncomfortable. Bitcoin is not dangerous because it goes up and down. Bitcoin is dangerous because once you understand what it actually represents, you start seeing everything else differently. Your paycheck differently, your savings differently, your rent differently, your retirement plan differently. Even the word money starts feeling less stable than it used to. And the strangest part is this. Most people still think Bitcoin is mainly about price. It is not. And once that realization lands, it becomes very difficult to look at the financial system the same way again. So this video is not about hype. It is not about getting rich next month. It is about the possibility that Bitcoin is not really an investment story at all. It is a reality check, a stress test for the idea of money itself. And if that sounds dramatic, stay with me. Because the first thing most people misunderstand about Bitcoin may also be the reason they keep misunderstanding the system around them. The biggest mistake people make is thinking Bitcoin is primarily about returns. That is already a trap. Yes, Bitcoin has delivered extraordinary upside. Yes, it has also been brutally volatile. But if volatility is the only thing you see, you are still looking at Bitcoin through the lens of the old system. And that is where the conversation starts getting uncomfortable. Because Bitcoin was introduced as a way to move value directly between people without needing a financial institution in the middle. That is not just a product feature. That is a philosophical attack on how modern money is expected to work. And maybe that is why reactions to Bitcoin are so emotional. Because Bitcoin is not merely competing with traditional finance. It is exposing the assumptions underneath it. So the real question is not, should you buy Bitcoin? The real question is this. What if Bitcoin is not trying to join the existing system at all? What if it is exposing it? Most people look at Bitcoin like a ticker. Green candle, red candle. Fear, greed, repeat. But Bitcoin is not a company. It does not have earnings calls. It does not launch a better product next quarter. It does not need a charismatic CEO to explain why the future will be brighter. Bitcoin is a signal that money can exist outside political timing. A signal that rules can matter more than discretion. A signal that maybe the thing storing the value of your life was never as stable as you assumed. And once people start noticing that, normal financial advice starts sounding very different. Make that human. You worked harder this year. You were more disciplined. You saved more. And somehow the distance between you and peace still did not shrink. That is where the confusion starts. Because most people think they are failing at money, when in reality, they are living under a measuring system that keeps changing while pretending to be stable. Dangerous truth. Most people are not saving. They are slowly drowning politely. Working harder, saving more, still feeling further away from stability every year. And that leads to the next misunderstanding. People think Bitcoin is about getting rich. But for a growing number of people, Bitcoin is really about not getting diluted. You are not holding something that can be adjusted when convenient. You are holding something built to resist convenience. And that is where Bitcoin starts becoming psychologically disruptive. Now let us break the mental habit that keeps people trapped. When most people hear Bitcoin, they think volatile, and they stop thinking right there. Yes, Bitcoin is volatile, but volatility is not the whole story. Volatility is what people see when they do not yet have language for something deeper. Because what scares people is not just that Bitcoin moves. What scares people is that Bitcoin moves without asking permission from the institutions they were taught to trust. Read this slowly. People can tolerate risk. What they cannot tolerate is realizing that the rules they built their lives on may have been softer than they looked. That is why Bitcoin creates such strange emotional reactions. Some people become obsessed. Some people become hostile. Some people mock it for years and then secretly keep checking the price. Because Bitcoin does not just challenge portfolios, it challenges self-image. And once someone dismisses Bitcoin long enough, understanding it later becomes psychologically expensive. And ego hates expensive realizations. If you dismissed it too early, it hurts. If you bought too late, it hurts. If you still do not understand it, that hurts too. Bitcoin is not pressing on financial nerves. It is pressing on identity. And this is the part nobody wants to admit. Most people do not resist Bitcoin because they studied it deeply. They resist it because it threatens the story that made them feel safe. Bitcoin was born from a completely different premise than the traditional system. The starting question was not, how do we make investing more exciting? It was much more disruptive than that. Why should digital value require a central referee in the first place? And if it does not, how much of modern finance is built on necessity and how much is built on habit? That is where Bitcoin becomes uncomfortable. Not because it abolishes trust, but because it relocates trust. Away from promises, toward rules. Away from institutions saying, trust us, toward a system saying, verify the rules. And that shift may be much bigger than Bitcoin itself. Because when trust moves from institutions to rules, power moves too. And power rarely enjoys being redistributed quietly. But here is the human layer beneath all of that. When trust leaves institutions, people are forced to ask a brutal question. Was I protected, or was I just dependent? That question changes everything. Because once you ask it honestly, traditional money starts looking less like a neutral public utility and more like a managed narrative. Dangerous truth. The system does not need you to be stupid. It only needs you to keep mistaking familiarity for safety. This is where the conversation becomes personal. Most people do not come to Bitcoin because they love technology. They come because something stopped making sense. Their cash did not feel safe anymore. Their salary stopped feeling like progress. Their savings account started looking less like discipline and more like surrender. People notice it at the grocery store, at the gas station, when rent climbs faster than income, when owning a home starts feeling fictional. That is when the system begins feeling psychologically fragile. And this is where critics usually miss the emotional center of Bitcoin. They argue against it like it is a toy for speculators. But for many people, Bitcoin shows up as a reaction to betrayal. Not dramatic betrayal, not cinematic betrayal, quiet betrayal. The kind that happens when you do everything responsibly and still somehow end up falling behind. The kind that makes adults feel privately ashamed because their effort is real, but their traction keeps disappearing. That is why Bitcoin language sounds almost religious to some people and ridiculous to others. Because underneath the charts, the real argument is this: can money be honest? And Bitcoin's answer is not emotional. It is structural. Fixed supply, predictable issuance, open rules. That does not make it painless. It does not make it guaranteed. It does not make it easy. But it does make it different. And that difference may become more important over time. Because Bitcoin has now reached a strange place in history. Too big to ignore, too disruptive to trust comfortably, too alive to dismiss honestly. This is the deepest layer. People want Bitcoin to fit into a familiar box. Is it a stock? A currency? A commodity? A hedge? A bubble? A rebellion? A religion? And the reason the arguments never end is because Bitcoin touches all of those categories without fitting neatly inside any of them. Bitcoin is money, but not state money. It is technology, but not merely a tech company. It is an asset, but not merely an asset. It is a network, a rule set, a monetary standard. And for some people, an escape hatch from a system they no longer fully trust. That is why most people misunderstand it. They keep asking, what can Bitcoin do for my portfolio? But the more unsettling question is this: what does Bitcoin reveal about the system I was told was normal? And once that question lands, the frame changes. Bitcoin is no longer just something to buy. It becomes something to compare against. A ruler beside the ruler. A mirror held up to modern money. And the longer that comparison exists, the harder it becomes for the old story to stay automatic. Because now, the issue is no longer whether Bitcoin is perfect. The issue is whether the old system deserves the blind confidence it once received. Worldview shift. Bitcoin is not mainly a bet on number go up. Bitcoin is a bet that people eventually prefer transparent rules over managed discretion. And if that is true, then Bitcoin is not a side story in finance. It is a stress test for the idea of money itself. And that may be why this conversation keeps getting bigger. Bitcoin may not destroy the old system, but it may force the world to finally see it clearly. So no, Bitcoin is not what most people think. It is not simply a bubble, not simply a gamble, not simply internet money for speculators. Bitcoin is a confrontation with inflation, a confrontation with trust, a confrontation with political money, a confrontation with the possibility that the thing measuring your life has been quietly changing the entire time. And maybe that is why Bitcoin creates such emotional reactions. Because if Bitcoin is even partially right, then a lot of comfortable assumptions collapse with it. So be honest. When people reject Bitcoin, what are they really rejecting? The volatility? Or the possibility that the old system is less stable than they were taught to believe? Comment one line only: bad asset or better money. And the next question is even harder. If Bitcoin is not what most people think, then what else about money has the world misunderstood for decades? Because once money stops looking neutral, obedience starts looking voluntary.